call the meeting to order and thank everyone for their attendance today. We have our 4 to 6 o'clock meeting today, and we're going to have some briefings. And the first one is going to start with the Hampton Roads Transportation Accountability Commission, Kevin Page. And I don't know if y'all have had the opportunity to meet Kevin yet. Obviously, I've had the opportunity to work with Kevin for, well, over a year now.
Yes, sir.
And Kevin has done a great job in really working with this commission in getting some road projects planned and even under construction. So we got to tell him he must have a halo over his head by doing that.
I'll tell you what, Mayor, thank you for such a great introduction, but I want to say this is that there were a lot of changes and a lot of courage that has gone about in the Hampton Roads region with not only the creation of HRTAC, which I'll talk about in just a minute, but also with the hiring of me as their executive director, and also under your leadership, Mayor Sessoms, as chair of HRTAC. As you'll hear today, that we are now celebrating going from $0 to $1.2 billion in less than a year in projects, funded and construction underway. I know Mayor Sessoms.
We got a long way to go.
We got a long ways to go.
So
we've got all of the low-hanging fruit is now underway, and now it's time for us to start climbing the tree to make things happen a little bit more fruitful. So HRTAC was created by and empowered by an act of the General Assembly. A couple of years ago now, we are empowered to do many things. We are a very powerful regional body, and this is such a unique situation because Bob Crum over there, Bob, raise your hand for those of you who don't know Bob, Executive Director over at the
Bob,
PDC and TPO.
I didn't see you myself. I apologize.
Bob joined me today not only to support Greg, but also support HRTAC, because as you're going to find out today, that this regional government works so well because of the interface that we have with the TPO and moving forward. But this is where we are. Regional collaboration, we are authorized to finance and build and construct projects, also raise revenues. And that four-letter word we don't like to talk too much about, we have the ability to toll as well, which we'll talk about that in a minute. HRTAC's membership, again, this is the entire region. Moving forward, we've got the 19 voting members, as you know, Virginia Beach being a big piece of that action there. We also have our 5 members of the General Assembly and our non-voting members representing up there in Richmond as the Secretary of Transportation. And John Melvin, he has been such a great resource for us, as well as Secretary Lane. And it's been very good with your mayor here, our chair, has had an excellent working relationship with both of those individuals, which has really worked for us extremely well at HRTAC moving forward. Because we've had some really hard and tough decisions to make in the past 12 months as we've started up this organization, but also working with this regional government of Richmond on how we work together for plans of finance and moving forward. As you can see here, we get our funds from 2 different revenue sources. One is our local regional sales tax, the additional 0.7% that came in under House Bill 2313 in 2013, kind of a tongue twister there. And then also our additional fuels tax that comes in as well. That's that 2.1% that's on top of your cost of gasoline is collected at the wholesale level, where it's distributed from the terminal before it hits your pump. The piece that's very important for us to understand as well is that we have a lion's share of revenues that are relatively stable up there on the sales tax, but our gasoline tax, as you know, I've enjoyed not paying a lot for a gallon of gas, but it's also pretty much brought us into some disparity here because there's no floor on our gas tax right now as it's enjoyed at the state level. So we're working on trying to recover that 14 to 15 million a year. Secretary Lane and others listen to our Senator Wagner, a member of our HRTAC as well, as he courageously went to Richmond and tried to put a floor on that gas tax, which I'm sure we'll probably continue to have those discussions as we go forward for the next session. This is what I like to call the balance sheet. Bob and I work together on this to kind of talk about what is the role of the Transportation Planning Organization and what is HRTAC, because we're both kind of dueling in our identities. You know, we had to find a way that we could clearly on one piece of paper say, okay, here's what the long-range transportation plan, the CMAQ monies, and the Transportation Improvement Program falls over into how at HRTAC we pick up the ball from there and move forward with the resources we have available for the financing and constructing of those projects, levying those bonds, and moving forward as to how we make those projects move forward as well. So it's an evolutionary process for us as to how HRTAC moves forward. by the state legislative actions at HRTAC and the creation of the Hampton Roads Transportation Fund, the TPO is responsible for the long-range transportation plan. Those projects of ours have kind of moved forward in that process as to how the program is set forward. The Commonwealth Transportation Board, as you know, just recently voted in its 6-year improvement program. Well, we at HRTAC have one as well that's required by law of a similar nature for the Hampton Roads Transportation Fund. And then we are responsible at HRTAC for that financing and the delivery of those projects. Right now, our biggest client is VDOT in moving forward with construction projects, but we do have the power to go out and the authority to also construct projects on our own if we see that that's more efficient as we move forward. This is a pastel that's been painted on for the past 20 years, 2 decades. A little hard for you to read, so I made it a little easier for you here. You see we've broken our 9 projects into 5 geographic areas, which are of no surprise to you in moving forward. And as I mentioned to you earlier as to how we move forward these projects, a very monumental and courageous event took place over at the Transportation Planning Organization, and Bob, under you and Chair Johnson's leadership, moved forward in February to develop a process as to how we would develop our program of projects at HRTAC based on sequencing, based on project readiness. We had no real way or form or fashion in the way that we were created by the legislature to move forward until the TPO had categorized the projects and prioritized them. So that was a very important moment in time as to how they move forward with those projects, as you see up there as we move forward down to this slide here, which is where we are today. This represents $1.5 billion in construction projects that will be fully underway by this September. The last piece of that equation is up there in the top left-hand corner, which is the 64 segment 3, which, as you see, we just received from the Commonwealth Transportation Board $145 million worth of HB2, which is now Smart Scale, as was referred to as. And then also we pledged $145 million as well, which will go to the to HRTAC for approval this coming September at that meeting. But as you can see, all the way up the peninsula will be funded at that point, completely, 100%. Segment 1 is under construction. Segment 2 is in the final engineering stages to move forward for construction. 3, they're doing core borings. You'll actually see all of this going on if you take a trip out to Pierce's Barbecue, not to advertise, but give you a geographic point on 64. So starting there where the HOV lanes end, going all the way to Pierce's Barbecue, you're going to see all of that under construction here in one fell swoop. Gray area, as you see there, is our SEIS, a Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement. Moving into that is a very important decision that needs to be made, as well as down here for Virginia Beach, you see our 64-264 interchange project, which is funded Phase 1. Phase 2 to Witch Duck is also underway, and then we have an entire remaining turning movements that we are working with Executive Director Crum and his team to get that in the Transportation Improvement Program. And once it's in that constrained long-range transportation plan, we will fund and tip that project and then move into there as well. High-rise bridge was a big change for us here. We split high-rise bridge into 2 phases so that we could free up some resources to move ahead with that project and also delay segment 2, which really wasn't, that phase really wasn't necessary for another almost decade. So we were able to be conservative to move forward with that project and also fund the preliminary engineering for the SIPSA overpass and the executive terminal overpass out there at the 58-460-13 segment, which I think is very important to this jurisdiction, because you all also have a relationship with SIPSA, and getting those trucks safely in and out of the landfill from Virginia Beach is also a key component of that project. So we're moving forward with that preliminary engineering as well. Smart Scale, which used to be called HB2. HB2, as you know, in North Carolina is referred to something else, so they changed the name to make it less associated. And so we had a stable of applications that went through the TPO. We were very successful to move forward with a statewide funded project, which was $145 million for the segment 3 of the peninsula. And as we move forward this summer, we'll be going under contract with VDOT for that phase 1 project for high-rise bridge. We'll execute that agreement at the September board meeting authorization and be ready for the HB2 application for high-rise bridge moving forward. The SEIS is an important moment in time. Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads region, and all the other jurisdictions, because as you know, our economic vitality and quality of life is kind of like a 3-legged stool. You know, we have the defense, one leg, the port, the other, and of course, tourist trade and commerce and other parts of our economy fall into play as well. It's important for us to move ahead with the SEIS, knowing and understanding that this is the future of Hampton roads. Water crossings are very expensive. They're very hard decisions for us to make. But we are now at a moment in time where we're going to be positioned to move forward. And George Consalvo, which you'll see him in later, I think he's on item 3, accompanying 3 of your agenda. But Kaufman and Knowles has been brought on board by HRTAC to actually do bond validation for us. We're getting the structure validated through the Chesapeake Court as to how we're going to move forward with that process. So we're not going to delay, not for 1 minute, this project moving forward once we get the record of decision from the Corps of Engineers. So it's important to understand as well is that there are 4 different alternatives. Obviously, D is the alternative that has all-encompassed all of the different segments as to move forward with the project, all the way down to conservatively alternative A, which is just HRPT.
I think a fair statement, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, we all hear this talk about, you know, where's this next harbor crossing going to be? I believe the SEIS is going to tell us where it's going to be.
Yes, sir, that is correct. Not only will it tell us where it's going to be, Mayor, it's also going to give us a schedule, a proposed schedule as to the sequencing of that, which will run through the TPO, and you all will have that at the TPO level coming back to HRTAC to actually be ready to move forward. At that time, we'll be ready to come to you as the chair of HRTAC with a funding plan and hopefully a validated structure for bonding of those projects to move forward. So it's going to be a very well choreographed moment in time where we won't be blinking and losing another 10 years like we did at the last gyration. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now, as I mentioned, have a 6-year program of our own. It's our own funding plan. Moving forward with that, again, trying to then keep things moving on the SEIS, is that the Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement has a record of decision, but in order for the Federal Highways Administration to issue that record of decision, they have to have a funding plan to move forward with the first phase of that project. So working very closely with the TPO, we were able to get the first phase, the first leg of that phase, in the end of our 6-year funding plan, that $267 million on the Harbor Crossing Phase 1, that yellow line that you find in your handout. That puts that project on our funding map, assigns real money to that project, and then Executive Director Crump picked up on the draft CLRP, Constrained Long Range Transportation Plan, the full funding of Phase 1 to carry it forward, so we will not delay the SEIS record of decision because we now have money programmed for this project. So as we move forward, the first phase of the harbor crossing, whichever that may be, as the mayor was very clear to point out, that the Corps and FHWA, as a result of the record of decision, will make the determination moving forward with how that project will evolve. Important point to note is that HRTAC was created by an act of the legislature. Now that we've been up and running for a couple of years, we knew we had to make some fine-tuning. Some fine-tuning adjustments was what we found out is that in order for us to bond projects, we need to have control of the investment of the funds and also the control of those funds as well. So we also, in the process of doing that, also wanted to enjoy the same liability protections that other public entities have that are investing public dollars. So we went in and we tweaked and fine-tuned our enabling legislation so that it moved forward. Another good point, too, is as we've seen before in the press, off and on where we've lost the ability to have a quorum at some of our meetings, we also set up and established a way for a chief elected officer who sits on TAC to be able to appoint a designee in an event of an emergency where they're not able to attend within 48 hours prior to the meeting, so we can continue to keep those quorums moving forward. We also have the ability then to pull in the administrative and operating expenses into HRTAC, which right now today we're able to cover through our investment revenues as we've been able to prove over the past 2 consecutive years. We still have no floor on the gas tax, but as I mentioned earlier, we've given it that try. Also, Delegate Jones, chair of the Appropriations Committee, a very powerful committee at the General Assembly. It's very good that he's not only on HRTAC, but also in our corner up there in Richmond working with us. Realized that as we went through our funding plan of finance, we had to set up some scenarios as to how we could fund these projects quicker, how we could accelerate them. And what we found out is that in the Code of Virginia, there were not really clear delineations about how to move forward with tolling. Tolling was an issue that came up in our plans of finance scenarios moving forward. So the legislature now has legislated into the code as to how certain entities like HRTAC, NVTA, and also the CTB and VDOT can deal with hot lanes, new lane capacity, new bridges, and short segments as to how we can have those exceptions on tolling as to how we move forward. So it gave us some greater clarification and clarity about where we would be standing on our assumptions in our funding plan, and also with the rest of the Commonwealth moving forward as well. So that was a very important point for us moving forward, and it's been helped strengthen us at HRTAC and also the state of Virginia in dealing with these projects. We'll continue on our next steps to find solutions to move forward. I think HRTAC has made extremely good use of the funding that we have out there. I think we're going to reach a zenith of around $500 million in investments before we start to see the invoices for the projects that we have rolling in. We do have our first invoice in from VDOT that we're reviewing today, and we'll be making that payment this coming month. We also have the high-rise bridge. We're going to advance construction on phase 1 to again, keep that project rolling. Those funds were allocated to that project and programmed by HRTAC at the last meeting, our annual meeting in June. And they will go for, they being VDOT, will go for the pre-qualification of contractors in August. So that project is moving forward very quickly, and we'll go to that contract in September. SEIS draft will also be out this summer. Keep a close eye on that because it'll be out for public comment, and your comments count, and how we'll move forward with the record of decision on that, and obviously word from the Corps and FHWA by the summer of 2017. We're always out for the public discussion of where HRTAC will advance the funding and our plan of finance and moving forward, and also where the HRTPO is involved. And remember, our connectivity here is that long-range constrained transportation plan and moving forward as well. It's been a great opportunity to come out here today and talk to you all about HRTAC. I think it's really something here for this entire region to celebrate, because we're very fortunate not only to have a very strong transportation planning organization, but also to have HRTAC and the Hampton Roads Transportation Fund, where you can actually take planning to programming to project delivery, because we now have fundings and resources available to take these plans, accelerate projects, and unlock the Hampton Roads region as we move forward. I'll turn the floor back over to you, Mayor, and thank you very much for having me here today.
We thank you for your presentation. Any questions or comments from anybody, please? We thank you for coming over down. Appreciate it.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, sir.
And I want to thank Kevin for coming with this forward. If you go to chart 14 and you take a look at the money display, and I think it's really important for you all because you want to know when is I-64 phase 1, I-64 phase 2 is really going to affect, because that's the direct connectivity for us here in Virginia Beach. You can see that their allocation of funds on those two line items indicate to us that we will see construction for phase 1 begin in the year 2017, and we can reasonably assure that construction for phase 2 to begin in 2018. And that's significant for us. We've long awaited that. There's a lot of economic development along that Cleveland Street, the Greenwich flyover that many of you as council members adjoining that are very concerned about. And it also significantly enhances our SGAs both at Newtown and Pembroke. And it's really a big deal. And Mayor, I just want to commend you as staff, and been in road work for over a decade in this city. This is such a significant dedicated source of revenue, and the fact that the HRTAC is off the ground, it is a viable function for resolving the transportation issues in our region, is truly amazing, and appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kevin, thank you very much for coming over.
Sure.
All righty. Now, we're going to move on to the Hampton Roads Regional Benchmarking Study. Greg, we welcome you, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Hanson. The regional benchmarking study should be before you. It's the publication that looks like what I have here. There's a whole lot in this report, and I'm going to fly through some of it as quick as I can, but I certainly can't cover the whole report. The regional benchmarking study was actually funded. The original one was funded by a grant from the federal government. to provide quality indicators on socioeconomic variables to help inform the decision-making process. We're now in our 11th year, and that's a goal that we really strive to maintain. There is a whole lot in this benchmarking report. There's 171 different illustrations. We go through everything from the economy. We talk about defense, port, tourism industries that are important to us. And you can see them all listed there. And at the very end, we have some local comparisons where we take our member localities and we compare them against each other. Just to start off, we took a look at the American Community Survey data, latest data that was out there, and compared Hampton Roads to the other metropolitan areas that are between 1 and 3 million people. That gives us our competitor MSAs. And just a couple of statistics we can go through. We are number 1 in the percent of people that are in the armed forces. This is really interesting. We are 4th in terms of the percent of people who leave their jurisdiction or leave their county or jurisdiction of residence for work. We're 4th after Richmond and Denver and Baltimore, I believe, are up there. Percent of renters' income that is above 37%. We are 7th. That is not a good statistic. We don't want to be high there. Per capita income, we rank 20th. We're kind of in the middle of the pack there. Percent of people who have a bachelor's degree, we're also rather in the middle of the pack, 23rd. For median age, we are relatively young. We're the 32nd MSA with a median age of 35.5. And finally, the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of income inequality, we are 36 out of 36, which is exactly where you'd want to be. There's not a huge disparity between the haves and the have-nots in Hampton Roads, and we comparatively rank 1st compared to our other metropolitan areas. I'll touch a little bit more on that later. Touching on the economy, this is kind of more fun than anything else, but this slide simply illustrates the relative size of Hampton Roads economy. Hampton Roads economy is slightly smaller than that of Libya and a little bit bigger than that of Croatia. But that puts in perspective Hampton Roads on an international scale. Doesn't do much use for us in the country, but we do have a relatively significant economy, even with global standards. If we look at how we've been doing lately, well, you can see this is the gross product in Hampton Roads, and we had a significant run up from 2001 to 2007. We grew at 21.5%. Since then, things have not been so great, 1.8% since 2007. A lot of that has to do with employment. This is also not a chart that we'd like to see. The annualized percent change in total employment, this is going over the past 3 years, so from 2011 to 2014, the most recent time we have data for. We grew at 0.54%, well under the metro area average, and second last among competitor regions. I showed this slide last year, and we were dead last, so we've moved up 1 spot. If we take a look at the economy in terms of public and private employment in Hampton Roads, we talk quite a bit about diversifying the economy in Hampton Roads, and it's certainly a noble endeavor to strive for. But as you can see here in the beige color at the bottom, government employment has long been a huge component of the Hampton Roads economy, and that's total government employment. That includes military and all facets of government, federal, state, local government employment. It's been relatively flat, and this goes all the way back to 1969, and you can see that there's been significant growth in private employment as compared to government employment, and certainly something we'd like to see continue, but that has been the trend. If we look at the Hampton Roads economy over the past 10 years, we might not see a whole lot of growth in employment, but there's been a lot of growth and decline among sectors. And here you can see healthcare and social assistance has seen significant amount of growth. Surprisingly, so has the federal government, not over the past few years, but when we compare ourselves to 10 years ago, we're significantly up. One thing that Virginia Beach has been especially participant in is the leisure and hospitality industry. We've seen growth there. And then, surprisingly still, professional and business services. On the other hand, if you look at the other end, local government has taken a significant hit in Hampton Roads over the past 10 years. Manufacturing has also seen decline, and construction. Construction has been hit hard, and that's one of those aspects where we want to see recovery in the economy. Construction is where we'd expect it first. taking a little bit of a look at our labor force. This is simply the unemployment rates of Hampton Roads in green, Virginia in orange, and U.S. in black. And Hampton Road, the unemployment rates are a little bit tricky. The rate in and of itself is not such an important number. What is important is the trend, and what's also important is the components that make up the unemployment rate. So what you're looking at here is you can see the U.S. Declining trend in unemployment rates compared with Hampton Roads of Virginia. Hampton Roads used to be right with the state average. Now we're a little bit above the state average, and we haven't seen the decline that the U.S. has. If we compare ourselves to 8 years ago at the start of the recession, 9 years ago, we're virtually, we're better in every regard. We have higher employment. We have a larger labor force. We have less unemployment. But over the past 2 years, we've seen the unemployment rate decline. But the reason we've seen it decline is really because we've seen cuts to the labor force. We haven't actually seen that much growth in employment. It's really been a declining in labor force and declining people who call themselves unemployed. So that's something important to keep in mind of. There's several measures of wages and income. I'll just go over a couple of them here. But what we see here is a relative per capita income. So the U.S. is a black bar. That's right at 100%. And the blue is how Hampton Roads has compared to the federal or the national per capita income. And I'll talk a little bit about the green bar later. But as income is kind of reflective of quality of life, when we see that we're above that black bar, that means that our per capita income is actually higher than the national average. And when it's below, then we're below the national average. And you can see that we've bumped up and popped up above the national average a few times. And we did so up in 2008, and we've been declining on a declining trend ever since. The green line is Hampton Roads relative to Virginia, and there you can see we've been below the Virginia per capita income for some time, and currently we're about 90% of the Commonwealth per capita income. Another way of looking at income is average weekly wages. Here too you can see how the Hampton Roads had seen growth, and at 2009 we were above the U.S. average, and we have dipped down significantly since then, and we're starting slowly to come back. But wage and salary income is very important. This really talks about how quality of life is, especially with respect to cost of living. But this perhaps is one of the most important statistics with respect to quality of life. Now, this is the third income chart I've shown you, and they're all telling you a different thing. So that's part of what makes this study so important, is there's many ways to look at each aspect of a statistic to fully understand, comprehend what's going on here. Hampton Roads is the green bar there, U.S. is the black bar, and this is our real median family incomes. And Hampton Roads has been surpassing the U.S. in this category for years, and basically this is how much income each household unit has at a median scale, so it gets rid of the disparity when you have large income earners, and this shows that our relative quality of life is better than the nation, and this is a really strong statistic for Hampton Roads, especially with respect to income. And I'll just touch on one more thing with respect to income. We've heard a lot about this wageless recovery, and there's some people who say we are having a wageless recovery, and others who say we don't. The reality is, from best I can understand, at a regional level, there's no information available out there to support a theory that we have a wageless recovery, just we don't have that quality information available. But here what you have is earnings per worker, and this is inflation adjusted. So if it was completely flat, that would mean that earnings a worker have stayed the same when adjusted for inflation over all these years. You can see that we certainly had a period of growth in wages per worker, but that has flattened out. So it doesn't mean necessarily that we've seen a wageless recovery, but the trend is not going up, so we're not seeing increased wages, that's for sure. I'll move on now to one of the things that has been causing some of our income problems, and that would be the defense industry and the federal government. And here you can see this is real defense outlays at the federal level, and you can see it's not linear, it's very cyclical. You have builds up and you have slowdown. One thing I'll tell you is if we look at how much spending there was in the Korean War versus the War on Terror, as a percent of GDP, it's been cut in half. But in terms of actual dollars spent, it's gone up significantly. It's gone up 33%. But as a percentage of our GDP, it's been cut in half. So there's different ways of looking at it. There has been significant decline in defense outlays in recent years, and of course that plays into Hampton Roads. If we look at defense contracts in Hampton Roads, for example, you can see how defense contracts really saw a large degree, a lot of buildup starting from the mid-90s all the way up into 2010. We saw huge increases in defense contracts, which was very important in the region because it drove up incomes, and there was a lot of private sector employment that was tied to that. Since 2010, 2011, we've seen a decline in contracts, and this is significant because we've seen cuts to military personnel. And when we saw cuts to military personnel, coupled with cuts to defense contracting, the two exacerbated each other, which is why the private sector has had such a hard time creating jobs in Hampton Roads. Since 1969, we've lost almost 59,000 military personnel. In the past 10 years, we've lost 26,000 military personnel. So that, of course, is significant to our region, and that's, when you're the private sector, you're really swimming against the stream here to kind of create jobs. Moving on to the ports, I don't have a whole lot to say on the ports. There's a pretty large section in the report on it. Suffice it to say that the green line here is trade in Hampton Roads. The black line is world trade. And not surprisingly, you see that the two work together. So if we see an increase in world trade, it's more likely that we'll see more containers coming through the ports. As trade drops off, container traffic drops off. I will, however, say that the number of containers going through the ports doesn't really impact our economy in a significant way. Having the port here is a huge benefit to the economy. But the relative traffic on a year-to-year does not significantly change how we benefit from the economy. So that's something to keep in mind. Quick touch on the tourism industry. You can tell some of these charts are boring, and this is one of them, so to speak. It's relatively flat. This goes all the way back to 1990, and you've seen some slow increase. Part of that is because the leisure hospitality industry in Hampton Roads is relatively mature. It's not consistent across the region, so in the past 10 years, Virginia Beach's experience has been very different from Williamsburg's experience. And in the past couple of years, you've seen RevPAR issues in Chesapeake and Suffolk. So when we're looking at these charts, a lot of them are not necessarily reflective of each locality. It's region-wide. Regionally, we have not seen a whole lot of growth. We're back to where we were in 2007. Virginia Beach, I would say, over the past 7-8 years has seen much stronger growth than the rest of the jurisdictions have. I was talking to the mayor the other day about the North American Sand Soccer Championship, and that's just one of those things that Virginia Beach does well. I coach a team out of Chesapeake, and everybody goes to get a hotel at the oceanfront. $400 a night at the oceanfront.
And we thank you very much. Right, Johnny?
I try to use my Marriott rewards for it, and they go up. They have these different categories, and we had all these points. So I try to use my Marriott rewards, and they said, "Sorry, sir, it's a category 7 for that weekend, which is their top category." I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me." Anyways, when you do things like the North American Sand Soccer Champion, and you draw all these people in from Norfolk, Chesapeake, we had teams from Richmond, from Florida coming up, and of course nobody's going to miss little Johnny's soccer game, so rain or shine, we're there. Those kind of things have really done well in Virginia Beach over the past couple years. Moving on to retail, Hampton Roads is the green line here, the black line is the nation, but the point here is we've seen a relatively significant decline in retail over the years, and this of course has implication for revenues, strong implication for revenues. And as the share is decreasing, we have, of course, that leisure and hospitality, that tourism component here, which means that we're going to be above that national average in this employment. But that share of the pie is going away a little bit. Part of the revenue base that we get from retail we're losing from internet sales. And here's internet sales as a share of U.S. sales, and we have no reason to believe that Hampton Roads would be any different. Go back to 2000, internet sales were less than 1% of total retail sales. Now they're climbing up to 8%. And again, that's a trend we expect to continue. Now I know that not everybody actually claims this on their income tax forms as they're supposed to, so we lose a lot of revenue from sales tax that are actually purchased online and not claimed. Moving on to real estate, here you can see the value of building permits. As you're sure you're all aware, we saw that values peaked in roughly 2007, 2008. But the writing was certainly on the wall for the construction industry, which peaked in 2005. And here you can see the huge drop that we've seen in the value of building permits. What's notable here is between 2009 2010, some people thought we weren't going to see the bottom for some time, but we did hit the bottom, and it's just going to be a long, slow crawl back up. What you're looking at now is a federal housing price index, and they have Hampton Roads in the green line, again orange in Virginia, and U.S. in the black. And the reason I put this slide together is because a lot of times we have a short memory in terms of what has happened with real estate. So this is basically holding everything equal, bringing it all the way back to 2000. How do we compare to where we were at 2000? Hampton Roads saw a huge run up in housing prices, much more so than the nation, and much more so even than Virginia. And part of that was because housing prices at the time were undervalued, so we had some room to make up. Another problem with that is that suddenly we saw huge revenues coming in from the federal government in terms of income. And when we saw an influx of income with military personnel, that also drove up prices. And then a third thing was housing allowances from the military actually really increased. So when the federal government said, okay, the military, you get more housing allowance money, that went right into housing. So that's why Hampton Roads outpaced Virginia and the nation so much. Then we saw that fall right back, though. Right now we're still significantly above where we were in 2000. We're just below where we were in 2007. We're not the only one. This is an 8-year change in that index, and this is comparing us to other metropolitan areas. And you can see that about 2/3 of them are below where they were 8 years ago, and we're kind of in the middle of the pack of people who are below their pre-recession high. Quick touch on demographics. There's a whole lot of demographics in this report. Some of it's pretty interesting, and again, some of it is boring. Here's another one, those boring charts, but what you can see here is Hampton Roads' growth. It has not been huge. It hasn't been really significant. We've only had 1 year of decline going all the way back to 1960, and that was from 78 to 79, and that was resulting from cuts to the Vietnam War. But we've been growing pretty slow and pretty constant over the last couple of decades, and nothing hugely significant there, but slow and constant isn't a bad way to go. If we look at demographics in a different way, you're probably all familiar with a population histogram. Usually these are in the shape of a pyramid. Once we hit the baby boomers, we saw that the pyramid didn't hold true. And so now we're a little bit different. And if I add some of the generations on here, then you can see we have the greatest/silent generation. The boomers fit in there. Generation X contracted. Millennials bulked up. And then one thing that's really significant is we look at the next generation in Hampton Roads, and we see some tightening there. I do have this information. We'll make sure we have it on our website for each of the localities as well. One thing that I would note here is the experience among localities, again, differs a great deal when it comes to the population histogram. So what is true for Virginia Beach is not necessarily true for York County, Pocosa, Norfolk. It's all very different. But for Hampton Roads, you can see we have that Generation X glut, and the next generation, where we have a lot of school-age children coming, is relatively small. I put a couple of charts on transportation here. Again, transportation is one of those areas where you probably want to look at 5 or 6 charts to really get a sense of what's going on, and I know 1 or 2 charts can really do it justice. This just shows annual hours of delay per auto commuter compared to relative to our competitors. We're a little bit above average there. We have 45 annual hours delay. We have peak period travel times that are average. We have per capita vehicle miles traveled that are less than the average. But if we're looking strictly at delay, we are certainly above average. I'll just touch on the average airfare in Hampton Roads real quick. Hampton Roads is the blue bar and black is the national average. And what you can see here is we tracked with the nation pretty well with respect to how much airfare cost right up until 2010. And since 2010, prices in Hampton Roads have been escalating at a faster rate than they have nationally. So that's some area of concern. A little touch on Amtrak ridership. You can see how since around 2005, 2006, we've seen some increases in Amtrak ridership. The trend in Hampton Roads has been growing and outpacing that of the nation. Moving on to education. There's a solid chunk in the report that is dedicated to education. Here we have high school equivalents. And when we compare Hampton Roads to our competitor metro areas, we actually end up looking pretty good with respect to high school equivalents. And this is something, you know, our economic developers tout. But I would encourage you to look at this again, well, especially for localities. But we're above the average when it's high school. We're below the average when it comes to college educated. And then we pop up above the average again when we start looking at the professionals and PhDs in the region. So we kind of bounce around a little bit here. One thing that I would note on this chart is it shows how well we are doing with our high school equivalents, but we're not necessarily graduating these people, we're importing them. So if we take the statistic and we look at them in terms of 18-year-olds, we fall below the national average, but we bring in all these people from through the Department of Defense that have above that average, and that's why we get to that number. So education is certainly an area of concern. What you have here is graduation rates, and they changed the way they actually measured graduation rates starting in 2008. But we can see historically, Hampton Roads has been below the Virginia cohort for graduation rates, and that's certainly not where we want to be. Again, the experience is very different among some of our localities here, but that said, that's not a place we want to be when we're comparing below the state average. If we look at per pupil spending, we're also below the state average. And if we compare the amount of money that we get in, our localities get in from the state based on their complex formula, we actually get more from the state in Hampton Roads than the average localities get across the strait. So we're pulling in more money from the state, but we're underfunding in the region, and that's unfortunate because there's two real things that happen with education. One of those things is if you educate people and you make sure everybody has a solid understanding of math and English, then you're doing the best thing you can to build your workforce. But if you don't educate those people, they aren't leaving. So that's always really important. You both have your carrot and your stick. When we look at per capita spending, just quick touch on that. There's a government finance section in here that goes through a lot of this, but we can see how things have changed since the late 80s, and public safety has been, a lot of those have been held relatively constant. Certainly education took a hit when we saw the decrease in property taxes, and per capita local spending, of course, perfectly tracks with per capita local revenue, so you can see where the money is going. The quality of life section, one of the things I frequently tell people when I'm out presenting is, you know, we talk a lot about growth. We talk a lot, you know, people want to see growth in employment, they want to see growth in income, they want to see growth in all these numbers. Really what we want to see is growth in quality of life, and that's not always so easy to measure, but quality of life is really what we're striving for. If people are better off than they were before, then we don't care if the number of GDP is going up or down or the employment number is going up or down. Are you better off than you were before? And one of those components is this Gini coefficient that I touched on before, and the fact that Hampton Roads comes in with the lowest number, which means we have the least disparity between the haves and the have-nots. It's also reflected in our above-average median family incomes. This is a very strong indicator of quality of life, and actually if you start looking across countries with low Gini coefficients, really have a much better indicators in terms of quality of life, and that's also true for Hampton Roads. Our violent crime is well below average, and our poverty rate is well below average, but those are some of those things that track with low income disparity. Anyways, that pretty much wraps it up. In the very back of the report, there is a section on local comparisons. Of course, at the Planning District Commission, we're representing you regionally, so we don't necessarily want to focus on the difference between localities, but certainly you can go in the back and you can see how Virginia Beach compares to our other member localities on a number of issues. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, we
you
thank
might
you,
have.
sir. Questions or comments? Yes, sir. John?
There's something we've often talked about is STEM, and I know it's something the mayor's talked about also. Does the data allow you to go to the Department of Labor Statistics and talk about what the workforce looks like relative to the classifications that are considered to fall within the STEM category, so we could see how our workforce has changed or not changed relative to that? Is that something that's achievable?
We can do that through the occupational classification codes. Unfortunately, they're becoming much more restrictive with what they'll give us access to. So we lose a lot of that in terms of certain occupation classification codes. But that would be an interesting way, I think, of presenting the data, and certainly something I can look into, just comparing STEM and what we've seen traditionally with those occupational classifications.
And following up on that point, another thing that's changed dramatically different in terms of demand signals from employers is certifications versus four-year degrees.
Yes.
And is there any way that that the data allows us, or the data set you have access to, that can look, or maybe through surveys of the regional's employers, and whether it's whoever it might be, shipyards or it's steel or whatever, that looks like what's the demand, how the employment picture has changed in terms of jobs requiring actual certifications, third-party verified, obviously, certifications, versus what it was before in the trend line?
Yeah, actually, Opportunity Inc., the Southside Region Workforce Investment Board, I believe, has done a study on that, I believe, in the last 2 years. And if I can locate that, I'll be sure to send it your
Great.
way.
Thank you very much. That's all I should know. Thank you.
Amelia?
Just looking at 32 where you mentioned education, can you expound a little bit more about where you mentioned we are below regionally? We get more from the state, but you mentioned we're underusing what we have. Can you go into a little bit more?
So what it was, across the Commonwealth, you have seen cuts to education spending. But what I was referring to here is that per pupil spending in Hampton Roads, of course, is below that. If we take how much is spent on education, how many children we have in the system, our number is below. But if we look at how much we are getting as a region, how much we get from the state, percentage-wise, compared to the other localities across the Commonwealth, we're actually doing better. We're doing significantly better. And so when we're looking at this as, everybody has the constraints that are set in by the state. I believe I have the numbers here. So in Hampton Roads, local spending constitutes about 42% across the region. 42% of spending on education comes from localities. For the rest of the state, 52% of all funding on education comes from the locality. So we're 10% lower there. And then the state is 33% of, across the rest of the state, it's 33%. In Hampton Roads, the state contribution composes 40%. So that's significantly higher. And again, the experience is going to be very different across localities, and it's based on the ability to pay. They have a formula for that. And so, where Virginia Beach is very, I think Surrey County actually pays the most because they have a high ability to pay due to the nuclear power plant and the incomes that are associated there. So the experience is very different, again, across localities, but when we're looking across the region, this is something we see.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yes, sir, please.
But I think it is important to note that there is no studies that I know of that shows that there's a correlation, cause and effect between per capita spending and educational performance.
That is absolutely true.
So I think when someone says you're underfunding, I think you always have to put that in the context of output, that you're getting a lesser output than you would want, and the reason you're not getting the outcome that you want is because you're not financing appropriately. And I often think our public schools do, not that they couldn't do a better job, but I think all we would agree with, they do it at half of the price of the private schools, and they do a great job. So I think it's important for people to realize that that's just an input, that's not an output criteria.
Very true.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming down and making the presentation.
That's great.
We'll now move to the arena financing. Andrew, we welcome you and your team here.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, good. Maybe I just set it up here.
You're on, young lady.
I am on. Thank you for calling me young. I appreciate that. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to address all of council. I am excited to announce that we have a Made in the USA loan alternative to present to you today. Our vision, and by our vision, I mean the city's, the public, and ESG's vision, is here. We are here to create a flexible, state-of-the-art facility that is iconic not only to Virginia Beach, but our region and the state. It offers events for everyone, creates memories for a lifetime, creates jobs and businesses, and draws major acts and top-tier events, and to create that year-round playground. I don't want us to lose sight of the city economic impact of over 2,300 jobs during construction and $240 million in spending. This will be over a 2-year period once we break ground at the end of 2016. The economic impact over time will be 440 jobs created by this facility, $15 million in annual salaries, and over 65,000 room nights, and that's just in the winter season. Net new spending, 20-year present value of over $1.7 billion. And I want you to know that this does not include any potential impact of additional development that this could spur over time. What remains the same in what we are proposing today? Everything except the lender and the loan structure. All previously negotiated agreements, I actually had one of my staff do a count today. If they are correct, it's 419 pages is what the development agreement is. We're asking for a change to basically 1 page. The fundamental business model and market analysis doesn't change. The city incentives do not change. It's still privately financed. It's going to be locally owned. We have a highly qualified and experienced team that we started it with back in 2013, 3 years ago, and are still with us today. And we are dedicated to minority participation on this project. What are the changes that we're asking for? The lender will be a U.S. investment bank. We're asking for changes in the loan structure, which I will go over in a few minutes. There are 2 clauses on 1 page of the development agreement that, based upon our attorney's review, need to be changed. Obviously, the city attorney would have to opine on that. The main benefits of this proposed financing is it's a domestic alternative to the Chinese loan. It addresses any perceived security concerns that we have heard from the public. It removes the Chinese procurement requirement. We now have no required Chinese content. It removes the political volatility of what happens internationally, whether it's China, US, and we all see what's happening around the world, and that's removed. An accelerated development and opening. We will break ground this year. We will have our grand opening by the end of 2018, if you give us permission to move forward. A U.S. bank trustee will administer the loan proceeds. It will not be anyone from China. There is no balloon payment or interest rate adjustment that has to happen at the end of the 15 years, which was in the Chinese terms and conditions. So there is no risk of that any longer. It is actually a fully amortized loan. And it does have early pro sports team potential. We've always said, and I think everyone here knows from past experience, that until you are building a facility, you really can't get in the conversation. What is our plan of finance? It's a taxable municipal bond, which is a known finance structure to this community and to the people here in the room and you council members. It is a U.S. investment bank that represents large investors. And the bond proceeds will be limited to the use for the construction contract, the related cost of issuance, and the required reserves and escrows that are usual and customary in a taxable municipal bond. There is no developer fee, and we are not taking any money out of this loan closing for the money that we have spent on this project. And we will be fully responsible for the debt, not the city. The bonds will be repaid by the same revenue streams that are currently in the agreement, which is 1% of the hotel tax and the but-for taxes, and from the payments from the arena operations that we're responsible for. The VVDA may serve as a conduit issuer. There are no obligations and no recourse to the VVDA, the city, or the state. And the same role it plays for other private entities, such as Westminster Canterbury, which was a deal that this council approved less than a year ago. And there actually will be some annual fee revenue for the VBDA for playing that role. So the proposed changes in terms, what are they? The type of lender, the form of commitment, and our debt-to-equity ratio will change. The loan will fund the full construction contract. Debt payments, however, will likely decrease based on the current market and where interest rates are today. The payment cap of city incentives that is already agreed to in the Arena Fund Agreement cannot increase per our existing agreement, but they are very likely to decrease because of the interest rates that are available in the current market, notwithstanding anything that's even happened in the last week. This was prior to what has happened in the market. Our equity contribution is estimated to be approximately $10 million. So this is the page that we're asking for some changes, and I don't ask everyone here to be able to read the screen, but literally, we can hand it out, but literally we're asking for minimal changes as far as wording to the actual document if this transaction is approved with all the other incentives, all the other terms and conditions that were negotiated prior to this date. This is what we're asking this council to consider. The city protections that are actually all the white that is not changed, that has not been redlined, the city protections that were built in for the city to look at the loan documents and approve the transaction even after, hopefully, you vote for this, are that you retain the right to review the funding mechanisms and assurances that the money is there, that this project is built, which will include a payment and performance bond, will include that all the monies that are required for the construction of this project are obligated at loan closing, the protections and the right to cure, but not the obligation to do so. And I think that's a very important thing to remember. This document does not require the city to cure any default that we may have under our loan. You will have the right, but not the obligation. and that the city credit rating implications can be reviewed. Initial review by all concerned is it should not have any detriment to the city rating concerns other than what may have been reviewed prior to this date. And obviously, the finance director will have to opine on that, but that is our understanding at this point. So this is the future vision of Virginia Beach that was published long before we were even involved in the arena. The arena has been something that's been on the city's plan for some time. What is our ask? We need to move forward. We have been working diligently. Today, the investment bank agreed for me to release who they are, which is Ziegler. They have actually made some formal comments that will be coming out in the press probably as we speak. And anyone that has worked with us know that we don't put all our eggs in one basket, and we've been looking for this alternative for some time. This alternative was not available in the investment markets 3 years ago or even 2 years ago. But now the time has come, and it is available to us to take advantage of. We have forwarded the proprietary information requested of the city staff for them to affirm this structure and that it is viable. We're asking for you to affirm that we can move forward with this transaction. Some who are aware of this scenario question, is it too good to be true? Ziegler has indicated that this deal is fully baked, and they are confident they can get this done in short order, but without the affirmation from council that we can go on, we can't go any further with them. The time is now, the markets are right, and let's get this shovel in the ground before the end of the year. I'll be glad to answer any
Thank you
questions
very
or
much, Andrew. We
concerns.
appreciate that presentation. Questions or comments, Bobby D?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think from the beginning, this project is a prototype of what public-private partnerships can and should be in terms of the developer taking the majority of the risk and the city assisting with some of the necessary infrastructure and things. And what I was impressed about your group was always your willingness to listen, and I think this is in a large response to you hearing about the concerns about the Chinese connections. And we've just recently had a presentation about a couple weeks ago that, that this was a major factor. And I think the fact that you listened and responded, and the fact that you're such a local company with a vested interest, this has the potential, not only, as you said, you have to develop the arena, but to spur a significant amount of other private similar type things going forward and really turn that into a destination area.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
John, your earn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think this is really a good news story. We've taken something that is a really non-traditional way of building this type of infrastructure in our city and having a private partner. And in order to do that, we really thought that we had to do a non-traditional financing means to get there. And so I commend Andrea and her group for working hard to come up with some alternatives. And obviously now we've got a non-traditional way of building these, but we're going to actually combine that with a more traditional way of financing it. And I think that
Would you expect anything different in Virginia Beach?
well, I tell you what, we're doing just fine. And I think that when staff has an opportunity to finish their due diligence and we take a look at really what the expectations are of the bond market, I think that we're going to find that in this particular scenario with these changes that the most likely scenario is that the city's contribution will actually be reduced. And as Andrea had already stated, it will not be more than what we have already discussed and voted on. But I think that we have an opportunity for a really big win here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Rosemary.
I have a question for the city manager. When do you think this will come back to us for a vote?
We plan to take you into closed session next Tuesday and have a frank discussion after we've had a chance to evaluate the city attorney, DCM Smith. Myself have been engaged with Andrea and her team, as she has been engaged to get you all up on what her proposal is today. We think it's important that she brought this forward. She's making a bold statement here with regards to the current agreement and the financing terms that the public was aware of. She needed to bring this domestic solution, financing solution forward. She's doing that today. We are actively engaged. Mark, you might want to, if I can hand this over to our city attorney, we have procured a bond counsel to assist us in the evaluation, working hand in glove with George Consalvo over there that most of you are very familiar with, and Andrea's team. We'll get our fingers on the pulse of all the particulars here, and we'll provide you a line-by-line analysis and provide the staff recommendation so that you are fully aware, so that potentially you could move forward with even a public comment period on the 12th of July, if you wish to move that fast.
Well, I think they've done an outstanding job of listening and really removing one of the criticisms of the procurement part of it had to be from Chinese products and of course having financing from there. So I think it's fantastic what you've done.
John Moss.
The point I wanted to make, because I think this is a good presentation for the public that's watching, is that the fundamental business analysis that always made this a good deal was their ability to generate the revenue, the business case analysis, the ticket sales, the venues, the number of events, has been confirmed because a private set of investors aren't investing money because they don't want their money back. They do. But they had to be sold on the underlying business case that talked that the venue can actually generate the cash, and as I've said several times, I believe can exceed those very conservative estimates. So this is just a question of how to get there. But people need to remember that if you don't go to the facility, you don't pay for the facility. I've always said that.
That's
but more
correct.
importantly, the sound business case that their team put together is the private sector has once again affirmed that it can deliver the cash flow to make the facility work. So my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The only thing I would like to say in response, we are asking, and I realize the city has to determine that, but we're asking to have a vote before you leave to go on break, because otherwise, if we have a tremendous amount of people, both at Ziegler, attorneys, and our staff that are working on this project, we basically are at the point where not a whole lot more is going to be able to be done. And so if they get pulled off this project to go to another, and we have to get them refocused on this because they're working on it literally around the clock. My emails are pinging all night long, and they're not from China. But I'm asking for you to look at a way to possibly do that, is what I'm asking
Well,
for.
the changes are not, it's one page, and we should be able to.
Yes,
Louis
ma'am.
and then
Oh,
Amelia.
I'm sorry.
John made a good point. And would it be possible for us to see your revenue feasibility study before we're asked to vote on July the 12th?
Well, we have sent the projections that have been submitted to the lender to Patty, so she has that information. Obviously, we consider it to be proprietary, but we have sent that to her for review.
At least our committee ought to see it, I think.
I think that's doable.
Go to the city attorney's.
Again, as long as it's held to be proprietary, that's my only request.
And we can do that, right, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, sir.
I knew that. Amelia?
Well, we appreciate your transparency today.
Thank you.
And you're standing there with confidence that you brought something positive to us. And you took the time to meet, at least talk with us prior to this, so we have a working relationship with this. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. I will just thank you for coming over. I do think, obviously, the way it's been presented to the public today, really, and I think we've heard a few comments about what might be coming, but we really won't have the details till we meet in closed session next Tuesday, and I look forward to that meeting. But I want to reiterate what I think John and Louis just have said, but this is a privately financed project, And John, I will even add, with no funds coming from the general fund for the infrastructure, okay? Are you happy? No, but it is privately funded, no funds from the general fund to support this project. We also must look at the current state of the economy. It's liquidity everywhere, and who'd thought last week that this week the interest rates would even go lower? And really, this project gets paid back through cash flow. And it's a heck of a lot easier to have that cash flow be better with interest rates being lower. And that, to me, if you're asking me where the opportunity is for everyone, for the city and for our partner, is about these rates. And I would like to see some public input, Bobby, before the 12th, if at all possible. I do see the point, though, about the way these interest rates are today, you know, and basically being, changes being more for the good than I think to the other way. So we'll get on, we'll roll up our sleeves. You all just keep on pinging on the email at night, you know, 24/7.
We will, I assure you, we will.
But we'll see what we can get done.
Right.
Okay.
We want to bring this to our hometown community. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
I bet you those rates are up under 4% today.
Oh, I think you can probably get 3 and 4, 3.5 million, I believe.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Okay, we have planning items
Definitely a 50.
to conclude our meeting, and we're doing very well today. Barry, we're glad to have you.
Good afternoon. I'm here to present the glimpse of the planning items, and again, it's your lucky day because I'm not going to do the presentation. So Carolyn and Kevin have been doing a great job for the last 2 weeks, so I'm going to let them keep on going. I have one item just to let you know, the 12th. On the 12th, in addition to the planning items, you'll have the oyster plan and funding issues related to oyster shell recycling. So that item will come up the 12th.
You just brought up something that, Council, I'm just saying this on my behalf, but I have been hit pretty hard from the environmental community this weekend pertaining to some of the issues with the Karen Forget's, is that Chesapeake? Lynnhaven River now. And my thing to you is that I really believe the city's in a position right now, they're trying to fix some things that perhaps were not handled appropriately in the past, and we're dealing with that, and that we are still going to be a very environmentally friendly city. I think I can speak for the entire council when I say that. And we're going to keep on moving forward, and we're getting out some requests for RFPs for some contracts that should have been done some time ago, but anyway, we're on it and we're trying to fix it.
Okay.
Thank you.
With that, Carolyn Smith.
We're glad to have you.
Good evening. Kevin and I are going to give you a glimpse into July, and I'll very quickly go over the July 5th items, and Kevin will talk to you about the July 12th items. All 5 of these items that you'll hear on July 5th were recommended for approval by both the planning staff as well as by the Planning Commission. And item number 1 is a conditional use permit for an assembly use. And in 2004, when the Simon Family Jewish Community Center was constructed, it was classified as a private athletic club, and it did not require a use permit. The zoning ordinance has been changed, and it is now classified as an assembly use, so they do now require a conditional use permit. The request is for the installation of 2 30 by 40-foot storage buildings over top of one of the existing tennis courts. 3 of the tennis courts will remain, and 2 of the tennis courts have actually already been transitioned to parking spaces. These buildings are proposed as beige, 12-foot-high prefabricated buildings, and they will be out of view from the right-of-way. And there is some mature trees between the proposed structures and the office building to the north. Item number 2 is a request for an in-home daycare, and the applicant would like to care for up to 12 children within the single-family dwelling that she rents. The 11,000 square foot parcel is zoned R15, and it is in a cul-de-sac in the Hillcrest Farms subdivision. The property has a large backyard, so there's ample area for the children to play, and the driveway provides sufficient area for drop-off and pickup of the children. The proposed hours of operation are 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and consistent with the zoning ordinance, she does intend to employ one assistant. Item number 3 is a request of the Walmart near the Lynn Haven Mall. And Walmart is requesting a bulk storage yard for the storage and display of lawn and garden products. The storage area will be installed and used seasonally between the months of typically spring through summer. And the merchandise and split rail fencing encompassing the area will be removed when not in use. The storage area will encompass 20 parking spaces, but this will not reduce the number of parking spaces below the minimum required by the zoning ordinance for a retail use. There is an existing row of mature vegetation along the southern property line, which is along Sabre Street, and that will aid in screening the bulk storage yard. Item number 4 is a conditional use permit request for motor vehicle sales. In 2005, on this site, the City Council approved both a conditional rezoning as well as a conditional use permit for automobile repair on this property. And the applicant is proposing to add motor vehicle sales to their operation. The application states that the majority of their marketing will be done through the internet, so there's really no need for outdoor display of vehicles. So the request is for up to 5 vehicles to be displayed inside their existing showroom. So no changes to the building or to the site layout are proposed, and the hours of operation will coincide with the existing car operation, the auto repair operation. And the last item for July 5th is a request for a conditional rezoning from I-1 Light Industrial and B2 Community Business District to conditional A18. This site is 23 acres, and the applicant proposes to subdivide the property and rezone 16 acres to conditional A18 in order to develop up to 282 apartment units. Interestingly, the almost 11-acre site to the west was rezoned for apartments in 1986 at a similar density. So the submitted plan depicts 10 three-story apartment buildings, most of which are oriented around a large retention pond. The community will feature a clubhouse with outdoor pool, outdoor fireplace, a large grill area, dog park, and a playground, as well as some nice amenities for indoor activities such as a large exercise room, a coffee bar, a Wi-Fi cafe, a theater, game room, and large television screens throughout. The submitted renderings depict a contemporary design and features cedar and cement fiberboard siding.
I hate to interrupt you, and this is fine, I love the application, but can we get straight on how many apartments we've had added to the community within the last 2 or 3 or 4 years? Our population is growing because we have been putting some apartments out there, and they're rented, which is great. I mean, it's really got my curiosity.
Also, if you could you give us an idea what the rental are gonna be,
The rates?
Yeah.
Sure.
please?
John,
That's a sensitive area there.
I think it's gonna be
Where
competitive.
is that exactly?
And also, one of the things that's happening is household formations are up even with population not growing as fast. And that's what a lot of people are not
It's down
catching.
past Haynes and Amelia.
Probably
That's
will be an
Haynes.
But the
improvement.
divorces, our kids are older, and so
Town
the
Road's just a
household
little bit up,
formations
is that
are
right?
up.
They're doing this really nice.
Yeah.
It's part of the Dominion distributing property.
Yeah, we're Atlantic Dominion, Robin Ray's business.
Yeah, it's all,
is.
she's got all that land around, it's a perfect spot for it, and it's great. Yeah, but I'm just apartments, which is great. If
Well,
they
it'll
keep
be
renting,
around-
I'm happy.
It'll be on the bus line, too. It'll be on the bus line.
Oh, yeah,
as well.
great
The
location.
rent they're going at, I don't think they'll be on the bus. We'll see.
All right, who's next?
Never know.
I'd bet on it.
Good evening.
Might take
So before you go away for vacation, we decided to give you a light agenda on July 12th. There's 4 items. All were recommended for approval by Planning Commission and staff. First item is for a home daycare to care for up to 8 children. This item did have opposition show up at Planning Commission. Some of the neighbors, there is another home daycare on the cul-de-sac, which got a use permit for up to 12 children. Neighbors were concerned with parking. It sounded like a dispute. There's been a police report, an assault, but it really doesn't have anything to do with this daycare. It's actually good use. We've had our zoning inspector go out and monitor it over the past few weeks at 6:45 in the morning. Parking hasn't been a problem, but just as a fail-safe, we did put a condition in there that all the parking for this daycare will be in the driveway. Hopefully, that will smooth out the opposition. The second case is a subdivision variance off 75th Street. This is a 10,000 square foot lot, which the applicant proposes to divide into 2 5,000 square foot lots. This is kind of unique in that 75th Street doesn't go all the way to First Landing like most roads there do. If it did, they could subdivide by right, but they do need a variance for lot width. The first lot on the left there only has 20 feet of lot width, the other does not, and it does not have access to a public street. So that's what these variance requests are for. Site will be developed with 2 single-family homes, 2.5 stories, about 2,300 square feet apiece.
I've heard from the Civic League, and they're concerned that this applicant hasn't come to the North Virginia Beach for their zoning review committee or anything like that. So can you get with them and make sure that they touch base before this comes to us?
Absolutely. And we,
The whole lot width is only 20 feet?
yes, it's actually unique. It's kind of hard to see at this scale. The right-of-way line ends right here on 75th, so there's only 20 feet, even though the lots meet the required 50 feet in actuality. So it's kind of, it's a 50-foot wide lot, but then there's only 20 feet on the right-of-way, and the other lot will be accessed by a ingress-egress easement.
So it's kind of a flag lot. Yes.
Yes.
Private, I mean, kind of a fat flag. Shared driveway.
There's a lot of shared driveways there.
And right now, the property, because 75th ends, there is an existing access easement that services this property and the property adjacent to it. They're just going to extend that easement to service all 3 lots. Okay, the next item is a modification of the Indian Lakes Land Use Plan and a conditional use permit for religious use and childcare. In the Indian Lakes Land Use Plan, it specifically calls this parcel out for childcare. There is a childcare facility in there right now. A church would like to occupy the space. With a 100-seat sanctuary, there will be no changes to the outside of the building or the site. They will keep a daycare use associated with that church. But the land use plan needs to be amended. And then the last item on July 12th is a conditional use permit for auto repair. This is actually going to be an out parcel for a larger development, which is going on that whole treed area there. That's currently, plans have been submitted to DSC. It's currently under review. This application is for an automobile repair facility. It's a 5,000 square foot structure, and it has 2 things we really like to see with automobile repair uses, and that is a brick, nicely designed building, and the bays do not directly face Holland Road. We think this is a good facility. We've looked at others that this company has done, and it should be one of the nicer auto repair facilities in the city.
Any
And
questions
that's
or
what I
comments?
got for you.
We thank you so very much. And yes, ma'am? Folks, Barbara has something before we close.
You have at your places this report on the event houses. Since this impacts all of the residential areas all over the city, and it would be coming to City Council for eventual action, I thought you would probably want to know where it is now. This is the draft that that commission has come up with, that they will be taking out for public comment, and they're going to be having 5 public comment sessions and these dates, and I thought you might want to attend, especially the one in your area, so that you have this now and
Thank you very
know all
much.
about it.
Good meeting today. We'll adjourn. Thank you all very much for everything.